Hidden 18 meters underneath the town of Ramsgate, England, lies a wartime labyrinth with a story to tell. What role did this secret underground network play during World War II? And how did it protect citizens during one of the most brutal periods in the town's history?
It must have been like going into a scene from Dante's Inferno.
Thousands of kilometers away, underneath Butte, Montana, lies an abandoned network of mine tunnels, once known as the richest hill on Earth. Now, years after its closure, what is shaking the foundations of this once thriving town?
Fire in the hole! Kaboom.
Not bad.
And in northern Europe, just 300 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, is the site of the world's largest subterranean sporting venue. How did engineers build this Olympic-scale feat of engineering? And how is it continuing to drive innovation?
No one had ever dared to build such a hall.
Beneath our feet lie extraordinary subterranean spaces.
We're miles away from civilization down here.
Caves, mines, and networks of tunnels.
The jewel in the crown for underground technology.
Some designed and built by humans. Others formed by nature over millions of years. How were they created and adapted? By whom and why?
If the enemy takes one section, he's not able to stand down there and shoot into the other section.
Throughout history, life underground has captured our imagination.
It creates a very frightening but also very beautiful experience.
Now we're taking you further and deeper.
There's all kinds of wild theories about what could be below.
To unearth the mysteries, the secrets, and the wonders of these underground worlds. Buried beneath the seaside town of Ramsgate, England, lies a hidden network of almost 6 kilometers of tunnels. Although people flock here to enjoy the sun, it was once a vulnerable wartime target. The safety it provided underground made an indelible mark on history.
The tunnels were known to Hitler, but they couldn't be destroyed.
This unlikely civilian bomb shelter became a permanent refuge after a devastating attack known as the Murder Raid.
They turned over the town and dropped 300 bombs.
What was subterranean life like for tens of thousands of people? And how did construction innovations make this life-saving network possible?
It was one of the largest construction projects in the country.
Situated on the east coast of Britain, the town of Ramsgate was one of the great seaside resorts of the 18th and 19th century.
Princess Victoria stayed in a hotel just up on the cliff top.
Although the town's well known for royal visitors, its most significant features were built beneath, starting with the subterranean railway that connected the harbour with the main train line. Helen Seton is a local expert.
The railways arrived in Ramsgate in 1846. In 1863, this tunnel was opened and it came out onto a station right next to the beach.
But this seaside getaway sometimes fell in the line of fire. From 1914 to 1918, World War I was raging. Ramsgate's proximity to France was now attracting a far more unwelcome visitor.
The mighty Zeppelins and those early aeroplanes would use Ramsgate as a target, and they would follow the coast around and then up the Thames to drop bombs on London. As they came over Ramsgate, they would drop bombs as well.
29 residents lost their lives in these World War I bombing raids. But more was yet to come. By 1936, as potential conflict loomed with Germany, local engineer Richard Brimmel came up with an ingenious plan to protect the town's residents from a future attack.
He realized, watching the newsreel footage of the Spanish Civil War and finding out about the tunnels underneath Barcelona, that the people of Ramsgate could do better than inadequate surface shelters.
Brimmel designed a network of air raid precaution tunnels beneath the town, using the railway tunnel as its hub.
The council turned them down flat. Far too expensive. What do we need this for anyway? There's not going to be a war.
However, in 1938, Ramsgate elected a new mayor. ABC Kemp, as he was known, supported Brimmel's proposal and enlisted World War I Air Force Captain H.H. Balfour to assist in the construction of the tunnel system.
The need for tunnels after the experience of the First World War was made even more imperative by the fact that there was an RAF fighter base 2 miles outside the town, and Ramsgate was in the direct flight path.
In 1939, after several rejections by the British government due to cost and foreign policy conflicts, Kemp and Balfour finally received approval to break ground on their 4-kilometer-long network. And by March 1939, just months before Britain entered World War II, excavation began on what would become the largest air raid shelter in Britain.
80, mainly Kent miners, were employed. They worked in 2 shifts of 40, 12 hours a shift, and the work carried on 7 days a week.
By August 1939, Hitler invaded Poland and Britain declared war on Germany. Bombing raids were now only a matter of time, and these tunnels needed to be finished quickly.
They started work at a rate of 24 feet a day, which is roughly where I'm standing, back to you.
In an amazing feat of human strength, skill, and back-breaking labor, the 80 miners managed to dig out 4 kilometers of tunnels by hand in just 9 months. How the tunnel system protected the 40,000 residents from the German Air Force was remarkable.
12 permanently open entrances meant that no one in the centre of town was further than 5 minutes from safety when the sirens started. It was essential that people could get underground rapidly because it only took the German fighters 5 minutes to get across the channel.
But how they constructed the tunnels needed to take into consideration the soft chalk they were digging in, as tunnel manager Isaac Naylor explains.
As easy as chalk is to dig through, they still had to employ pneumatic shovels to be able to cut away at the front, and then that was then broken up and shoveled by hand into some small minecarts. The tunnels were 7 feet wide by 6 foot high. Any larger than this and they would have been made unstable.
Despite their stability, the tunnels still required some reinforcement, so engineers utilized a unique building material for the time.
We've actually been walking uphill on a gradient of 1 in 600. We've now got the concrete reinforcing, some 12 inches of reinforced concrete, primarily because as we go above 30 feet, chalk becomes weaker and weaker.
Construction shafts were built to provide access for miners.
This is a construction shaft, one of 11, that was bored down from the surface to allow the miners to excavate the spoil that they had created while digging. Their diesel locomotives pulled the trucks to points like this. The trucks were turned 90 degrees before being pushed into the centre there.
At the heart of Brimmel's design was the use of Ramsgate's existing Victorian railway tunnel and infrastructure.
We've got the ventilation shaft above our heads to make sure that all of the smoke and debris that was being created as the trains ran through, it had a chance to escape out up into the atmosphere.
When the siren sounded, warning of an incoming attack, people only had a few minutes to get below ground.
We're now standing at one of the original entrances. This would have all originally been open to the elements.
The entrances were designed to have a funneling effect, to fit as many people in as possible at the initial entry point.
By the time they got down towards the tunnels themselves, there would be no more than 2 people standing abreast, so they could filter off into the smaller tunnels.
The shelter's capacity was intentionally designed to accommodate double the population of Ramsgate.
There's enough room within these tunnels to house 60,000 people. That was 30,000 permanent residents and an additional 30,000 holidaymakers who our mayor, ABC Kemp, felt that even during the Second World War, people would still want to come on their summer holidays. The town were then marketed as the safest resort in the country.
Once safe inside the tunnels, life was cramped and uncomfortable. However, a few were given special privileges.
People in reserved occupations, so firemen and doctors and nurses who needed to be able to get in and out more quickly were housed in here because there are more access points. The air raid precaution wardens would issue them with a permit. They would have a bunk.
Most were forced to remain inside the tunnel, safe from the fires and destruction left by the heavy bombardment of the Luftwaffe. This confinement was far from pleasant.
Of the 250 alcoves that would have contained not 1 but 2 chemical toilets, you'd been separated from your neighbour by a nice healthy sheet of asbestos. There was no light in there. There was nowhere to wash your hands in there. We know the smell was dreadful.
Richard Brimmel's custom-built tunnels were like none seen before in Britain. Engineered to protect the lives of every man, woman and child in Ramsgate, as the Luftwaffe bombarded them from above.
Each of the entrances, we had 2 right-angled bends to counteract bomb blast and shrapnel. Should a bomb land on or near the entrance, it wouldn't be able to penetrate any further into the tunnel network.
These right angles were to prove incredibly effective on one particular night, known as the Murder Raid. On August 24th, 1940, at the height of the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe sent a bomber squadron to the nearby Royal Air Force Base. Ultimately, the RAF prevailed, but Ramsgate was attacked in what's known as the world's worst assault from the air.
They turned over the town and in the next 5 minutes dropped 300 bombs.
Britain's largest underground shelter, the Ramsgate tunnels, valiantly protected its residents from this deadly assault.
During that raid, 300 bombs killed 27 civilians and 3 service personnel. The rest of the town, thousands and thousands of them, were safe down here. Even with 300 bombs going off, deep in the tunnels right here, you would not have heard anything. It was this day that was known as the Murder Raid.
The bombs destroyed 78 houses, left 300 unfit for habitation, and a further 700 damaged. The Murder Raid left thousands of Ramsgate residents homeless, and the tunnels suddenly took on a new purpose.
This is the beginning of our tunnel town.
Jill Gilmore is an expert on Ramsgate's turbulent history and its underground tunnels, known to locals as Tunnel Town.
When people finally had the all clear after the Murder Raid, they left the tunnels and they went up out into the open, and it must have been like going into a scene from Dante's Inferno. There was smoke, there were flames, there were buildings that had collapsed, buildings that were on fire. You were confused because landmarks had gone and the road was blocked. And then imagine the horror of getting to your house, only it wasn't there.
The chalk tunnels were not designed for long-term habitation. And while some people moved back above ground, some chose to continue living in Tunnel Town.
You would think, why on earth would anybody want to live here? It's appalling conditions. But they had to make the choice of, do I live in a house that may be already damaged, that could be damaged again, and worry every night? Or do I come down here where I am 100% safe? So the people just said, we're staying here. People gathered what they could from the remnants. They gathered old clothes horses, old curtains, blankets to make a screen. And the council even found the deck chairs that they'd put in storage for the duration of the war. But over that first weekend, this is how they stayed.
Gradually, the place evolved into a subterranean neighbourhood with a strong sense of community.
In the evening, there would be all the families around playing games, the kids running around. This is where the main part of Tunnel Town was constructed, and this was a cafe that they could come and get food, and also the cafe owner was obliged to let them have hot water at night if you have a baby and you needed to heat up a bottle.
Even the children growing up in Tunnel Town maintained a relatively normal life.
The schools that were left had very few teachers, so the pupils just went in for an hour a day, and then they were free to roam around. Every entrance to the tunnels leads onto a public open space. The mums could just say, oh, go out and play football, knowing that they didn't have to go any further than the top of the staircase to be in an open space.
After the war, many families remained in the tunnels while the town was being rebuilt above them, until the last Tunnel Town residents left in the late 1940s. Thanks to Richard Brimmel's engineering genius and the persistence of ABC Kemp and H.H. Balfour, today the tunnels are a lasting testament to how great feats of engineering can change the course of history.
The tunnels were known to Hitler, but they were so well constructed and so deep in most places that they couldn't be destroyed.
Nestled in the Rocky Mountains of southwest Montana is Butte, arguably one of the most significant mining towns in American history. Within an 11-kilometer radius under the city, there are a staggering 16,000 kilometers of tunnel. But how did Butte, Montana, come to be known as the richest hill on Earth?
A quarter of all the copper in the world was coming from Butte.
How are the mines continuing to drive innovation today?
Fire in the hole!
And why did Evel Knievel spend time in the town's underground jail?
That's when he got his nickname, and the name stuck.
In 1864, the first settlers established Butte as a small gold mining camp. By the early 1870s, the gold ran out and silver mining took over, keeping Butte in business. But it was copper ore that really put Butte on the map. The copper mining ramped up and the city thrived. The town became known as the richest hill on Earth.
So this is the 100-foot level. This is the only accessible original workings that we have here.
Engineer Logan Dudding is responsible for the refurbishment and preservation of the Orphan Girl Mine, located on the west side of Butte.
We're only able to access this 100-foot level, nothing below, because the groundwater has been allowed to recharge here. This shaft is 3,200 feet deep. 3,100 of it is water.
The upper levels that have been restored give us an insight into what life was like for the miners here in the late 19th century.
The miners are paid based on a volume of rock that they're blasting during a week. So a lot of them would cut corners and would ultimately be crushed or killed, trying to speed things up so they could get paid.
As miners dug deeper, shafts were propped up with wood to prevent collapse.
The old shoring techniques was all done by timbers. You don't see any exposed rock.
At peak construction, Butte mines were using more than 1,000 tons of wood every week.
To give you an idea how much timber that the mine swallowed, the company would use over 30,000 board feet of timber per day.
And if digging deeper into the earth wasn't hard enough, getting the metals out was an even bigger challenge. The tunnels here still have both the original rails and ore carts that were used to remove the mine material.
So these were the style of ore cars that would have been used in the Orphan Girl. If they have a load of rock, they'd weigh about a ton. If they had a load of ore, they'd weigh 3 tons. It gives you an idea of the weight of the metal versus the weight of the rock. You know, you weren't shoveling dirt or small pebbles, you were shoveling boulders. After these things were filled up, you had to shove them by hand, and that was called hand tramming.
In the late 1800s, Butte became a hotbed for mining, and the metals excavated here were exported all around the world.
Here in Butte, we have more than 10,000 miles of underground tunnels.
Dick Gibson is an expert in the town's extraordinary history.
In the early 1900s, 1905, 1910, about a quarter of all the copper in the world, not Montana, not the United States, a quarter of all the copper in the world was coming from Butte.
Mine engineers studying Butte created a 3D projection of what is now beneath the town. It shows just how vast, deep, and complex the network of shafts and drifts is. Yet, the natural resources underneath the richest hill on Earth wouldn't last forever. And by the mid-20th century, the town's lucky streak was running out. By the turn of the 20th century, Butte, Montana, known as the richest hill on Earth, was thriving. The demand for copper drove the entire town to become an around-the-clock operation.
Everything in Butte followed the shift change. Every 8 hours, somebody else was coming off shift. Just as the churches were, the brothels were, the grocery stores, everything in Butte was 24/7.
As the mining industry here boomed, Butte's population peaked to nearly 100,000 residents, and soon the city's uptown district was running out of space.
With all those people up on a hill that was pretty constrained, we had to do what we had to do, which included building up, making skyscrapers, and going down under the sidewalks to find more space.
Over 130 businesses began operating beneath the sidewalk.
Sidewalks in Uptown Butte are vaulted sidewalks. That means that there is or was a space beneath every one of them. These used to have glass bricks in them that allowed light to go down into these under the sidewalk spaces.
Despite the rigorous laws imposed during Prohibition, Butte's nightlife during the 1920s was roaring.
Speakeasy.
Trixie sent me.
The name speakeasy comes from the fact that you had to speak quietly, speak easy when you said the password at the hole in the door. We're standing below the sidewalk. These skylights above me once held elegant stained glass that brought the light down through glass bricks in the sidewalk to light this otherwise fairly dark place. It was a high-class place. It was the kind of place that regular run-of-the-mill miners probably weren't coming to. We have so many touches of elegance. We have nice arched ceilings here. We have carved columns. We have terrazzo tile floors. Welcoming these people, these elegant flapper ladies, bankers, lawyers, these are the kind of people that would have been coming here during Prohibition time.
But in the mid-20th century, Butte started to shrink almost as quickly as it had grown, and Butte's underground town was all but forgotten.
When this place was rediscovered in the early 2000s, it had been abandoned for quite a few years. Prohibition ended in 1933, but the place continued as a saloon for a while. But Butte's population was declining. It was no longer a popular place and may not have been used at all for a few decades.
Just around the corner from the speakeasy was the Butte Underground Jail. built in the basement of the old City Hall.
Butte had quadrupled in population, so we needed bigger and better of everything. So the City Hall was built at that time. In the dungeons, the basement below it is where the jail was built. We have about 46 beds in here. They were typically occupied, maybe by murderers, maybe by drunks. The places were crowded, they were hot, they were humid, because the boilers for the building were down here too. The toilets were open. There were no places that you could go for privacy, no privacy whatsoever, and it was a place that you did not want to come back to.
In 1956, the infamous Evel Knievel was held here for reckless driving.
When Robert Knievel was arrested, another guy was already here, William Knaufel. William Knaufel already had a nickname with the police. He was called Awful Knaufel because he was in and out of jail all the time. The jailers said, look at this, we've got Awful Knaufel and Evel Knievel. That's when he got his nickname, and the name stuck, and he kept it, and he was proud of it for the rest of his life.
By the late 1950s, global competition caused the town's growth to level off and then enter a long period of decline. In the early 1980s, high production costs and low copper prices resulted in a full shutdown. For the first time in its history, Butte was a mining town without a mine. Now, decades later, a new generation is bringing Butte back to its roots. After a century of weathering the booms and busts of the mining industry, the town of Butte, Montana, began to revitalize. Scott Rosenthal has spent 30 years working in mines all over the world, and now leads a hands-on mine engineering course at his alma mater, Montana Tech University.
We're standing in one of the original underground drifts constructed in 1937 here in Butte. The students have rehabbed this.
Down the entrance ramp, students are brought into the mine, where they spend each class drilling, digging, securing, and blasting different drift areas.
So the students are working on getting new mesh to replace the old mesh and the old rock bolts out. Fire in the hole! We do want to come up a little bit. Yeah, because it was really low right here. Yeah. When they're down here and they're working, they're learning how explosives work, how mechanical systems work, how air systems work, how the water power works. They also understand that if they plan to get something done today, it might not get done. If something goes wrong, it's going to take me a little bit longer. So in the future, as engineers, they can build a better plan to build in that contingency.
Unlike the working conditions of the original miners, there are now some modern upgrades.
Underground, we have Wi-Fi available, which is, if we're doing an experiment, we can then tap into that experiment that's happening underground in the classroom, so we can demonstrate.
The School of Mining is not the only department using the tunnels.
The geological engineering department comes down to look at rock type. Occupational safety and health departments monitor the noise, look at different hearing protection. We've also had the geophysics department down here. They thump the rock and they're looking for, is there a big fault or some discontinuity in this rock wall?
The hands-on classroom also serves a larger purpose for the university. In 2013, a Department of Energy grant supporting a geothermal project is reducing energy consumption on campus.
So we're actually using warm mine water to partially heat one of our buildings. These pipes go down 300 feet into the water. The water's about 78 degrees. Then we pump that over to our natural resources building. There, a heat exchanger pulls out some of that geothermal heat out of the water, and the water comes back here at about 65 degrees.
New life is growing roots in these tunnels, giving back to the land what the mining industry once took from it.
This is an underground greenhouse, and the reason I'm down here is I don't have to heat it.
The research is led by Dr. Paul Conrad, a specialist in mine reclamation and environmental restoration.
We're looking at pine trees and there's sagebrush that's growing here right now. Sagebrush is a big thing here in the western United States.
The goal is to one day replace what was lost to excessive deforestation during the building of the mines.
2 years ago, we actually planted about 65 trees that we had developed down here it's a reclaimed site here in Butte. We actually had about 60 to 65% of our trees that we planted out there survived the winter. And so we're pretty excited about that.
Since the mid-19th century, Butte has faced adversity head-on, reinventing itself time and time again. And it has a very bright future ahead. "96 kilometers above Norway's capital city of Oslo lies the small town of Gjovik, and a subterranean world that exists in plain sight, with one of the world's largest unsupported man-made caverns, 30 meters above the town.
This is the entrance to the largest underground stadium in the world.
Hidden away 400 meters inside Fjellhallen Mountain is the Gjovik Olympic Cavern Hall.
It's quite unique to have a world attraction which no one can see.
This is construction on an unprecedented scale.
I don't think there is anything like it in the world.
What kinds of innovative engineering techniques made this possible?
It's only supported by around 60 iron bolts mounted in a bedrock.
And why is it unique?
It is the jewel in the crown for underground technology.
Hidden just over 400 meters inside Fjellhallen Mountain is the Gjovik Olympic Cavern Hall. When Lillehammer won the 1994 Winter Olympic bid, the small nearby town of Gjovik vied for and was awarded the host site for 16 ice hockey games. But they didn't have a facility large enough to accommodate the world stage. What they set out to create was on a level that had never been attempted or achieved. Geologist Rajinder Kumar Basin played a key role in creating the solution.
This is the entrance to the largest underground stadium in the world. There are still several houses up there, but of course during the construction of the stadium, the houses were vacated, but everything went very smoothly and people have returned back.
Although digging underground may seem like an unlikely choice, Norway has a history of building within mountains.
The mountain is there, so if you can make a hole in that, then you have not used any space outside, so it's environmentally friendly. It's impressive because no one had ever dared to build such a hall.
It's quite unique to have a world attraction in the middle of Gjovik, which no one can see.
Torvild Sveen is the mayor of Gjovik.
When I very first came here, I was just feeling that it's a boom, 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 and it's kind of, yes, you are actually hoping to see a troll when you come here.
Tales of trolls and prehistoric cavern dwellers became an unlikely inspiration for the Winter Games held here, where building below ground is a Nordic tradition.
In Norwegian folklore, there is quite a rich tradition about telling stories about trolls. As a nation, we remember our history, we remember where we came from because we were a mountain people.
The rich Norwegian culture would influence this underground space in another way, through the ancient runic writing system.
There is carvings called runer. That is the signs of the first people that were living here as fishermen and hunters. In the Olympics '94, we made pictograms of how would the first men have been drawing us as sportsmen. So it's a little history, but also a little funny moment.
Perhaps the greatest marvel of this entire facility is the earth itself, and the Nordic tradition of building within it.
This hall is very impressive because nobody had ever dared to build a 62-meter span underground object.
In 1994, the Norwegian town of Gjovik was approved to host the Olympic Ice Hockey Championship Games. Engineers got right to work.
This is the pilot tunnel, and this is where the construction started. Drilling and blasting technique was used, and this tunnel is approximately 150-200 meters long, and it came right up to the cavern roof.
But before they could start the actual stadium construction, engineers needed to first assess the integrity of the mountain rock. To do so, the team used cutting-edge mapping equipment, created especially for the excavation by the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute.
The rock type here is called gneiss. This is a metamorphic rock and has a lot of micro cracks. As you can see here, you can basically peel off the rock, so they're not very good rock quality. We were mapping every joint of the rock to see whether there is any weak spots in the rock mass. And these weak zones can present some stability problems, but it was important to see that many of these weak zones died out after a few meters. So we were recording these weak zones in a very systematic manner and simulating how the structure will behave when excavated.
In April 1991, construction began on the new Gjovik Cavern Hall Ice Hockey Stadium.
Construction took less than 1 year to complete the excavation of the stadium. And it's about 27 meters high and more than 90 meters long.
The team was able to map the rock in such detail and with such accuracy that they could move forward with a bold plan to design and build the cavern with no supporting pillars. The arched roof would support itself.
The key is constructing such a structure in different stages. Stage 1 of the construction, which is the pilot tunnel. Then you have stage 2, where you're slashing on the sides. Then you have stage 3, removing the abutments. All the stages of construction were computer modeled.
The plan for a self-supporting dome called for extra diligence during the excavation stage. But hollowing out a mountain is rough work.
It took about 170 tons of explosives to blast this big hole which is here. 140,000 cubic meter of rock was taken out, and we were surprised when this construction was completed.
When performing precise excavations with hundreds of tons of powerful explosives, careful monitoring is crucial.
The observed deformations on the top of the mountain are of the order of 5 to 8 millimeters, which matched very well with our predictions. We're allowing the rock mass to bear the load itself.
Building underground has some other unforeseen benefits.
We know that the temperature underground does not vary as much as outside. For example, today outside it's -10, and here inside it's more or less constant temperature. So the ventilation costs and other costs are dramatically reduced.
Maintaining a comfortable 16 degrees Celsius inside for players and spectators comes at a minimal cost. Yet keeping the ice frozen was a much bigger challenge. Temperatures inside the cavern are constant, but above freezing. And what gives visitors a pleasant experience causes problems for the maintenance of the venue's centerpiece, the ice rink. Operations manager Adam Erstman experiences firsthand how being underground can change the equation.
The design of the refrigeration plant depends on the heat loads imposed to the ice sheet. And in here, you have contributors to the heat load. Skaters and ice resurfacing system, and the light, and the temperature and humidity.
Energy use has been minimized using ingenious passive and active processes.
We have 25 millimeters of ice sheet, and under the ice sheet there's a concrete slab. And in a thermodynamic view, we are here removing heat from the concrete. In the concrete slab, we have around 2,000 meters of cooling pipes transporting a salt fluid. And this salt fluid have a temperature around -6 to 10 degrees Celsius. Under the chilled concrete, there is a layer of isolation, not to spreading the cooling downwards.
Suspended above, more innovative solutions were applied.
Above me in the technical grid, you can see this silver sheet, and they are reflecting the radiation heat. This technical grid just hanging from iron bolts that is mounted in the bedrock. The weight of this technical grid is around 50,000 kilograms, and it's only supported by around 60 iron bolts. The iron bolts are going as deep as 12 meters inside the bedrock.
At every opportunity, heat from the ice system is recaptured to reduce overall energy use.
Ventilation and the ice rink are the biggest energy users in the Olympic Hall. The arena has a great design of temperature movements. From the ice rink, we are removing the heat from the ice-making process. And this heat is used all around the building to heat up the facility.
While the cavern hall is what the public sees, there are many more secrets to this underground facility. Reminders that you are actually inside the earth.
The stadium is basically a dry structure, so the seepage of water has not been a problem at all. But now, when we are inside the pilot tunnel, you can see some moist conditions and some small drips of water. And these drips of water has created the icicles, which look like what we see in fairy tales. So it's a fantastic structures, and there's a lot of huge icicles. Incredible structures, I would say.
As world leaders in excavation, the Norwegian tunnelers used highly adaptive approaches to address real-world eventualities.
We design as you go in the Norwegian method of tunneling. When you do this seismic measurements, it's just like an X-ray. And we can see here that the cavern is located here.
Gjovik's Cavern Stadium delivered on its goal to host truly memorable Olympic experiences for players and spectators alike.
During the Olympics, we had 16 ice hockey matches here. The ice hockey players were quite fascinated to play matches inside the mountain.
This structure is basically the state of art in underground technology. Within a relatively small budget, the structure cost just $25 million. So it's not an expensive structure.
Even today, Gjovik Olympic Hall leads the world in technical innovation for cavern excavation.
We usually get a lot of visitors from various countries. Japan and Korea, where there's lack of space. The United States and also India, where they're building a lot in the Himalayas. The first thing they ask is, where's the pillar? And then, we have to tell them, there's no pillar here. We allow the rock mass itself to bear the structure. It's regarded as the jewel in the crown for underground technology.
Gjovik Cavern Hall isn't just a unique sporting environment and feat of engineering. It represents Norway's commitment to sustainability, along with just a hint of Nordic magic.